created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
And today, in the dissection of, we have another extraordinary aria that unfortunately has suffered, in a way, the same luck as other areas that we have shared in this season. I am referring that it suffers of the what I'm going to call, or what we all may understand the term fan service. Fan service, that is now a term that is very recent. This area suffers of that. What do I mean in this case? I am referring to La solita storia del pastore, also known as Il lamento di Federico, from the opera La Arlesiana by Maestro Cilea. It has been very famous, moreover, recently, or at least in the past 20, 30 years, because of the concerts of the three tenors, Pavarotti, Domingo, and Carreras, because mainly Pavarotti and Carreras liked to sing this aria. And that's what made it so famous. It is not that it was unknown, but many people got to know this aria because of them. And as we all know, the concerts by the three tenors are not really the best. They are very good as a first approach to opera, not that good if you want to approach to what the opera as a refined art should be. So, with that in mind, many people think or have in their minds the way Pavarotti or Carreras used to sing it, but have never later approached to the aria, even though it has been, or it is, one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever. Also, besides suffering of the fan service, which means exaggerating and overdoing everything just to please the audience, which is very unfortunate because when there is beauty, there is no need for exaggeration. But let's be sincere, that's what people like. It happens to have, in a way, a parallel story or a similar story as it was in the case of Werther that we have shared in another episode. Unfortunately, we are going to witness here again the life or the destiny of a young man who at the end decides to take his own life. He commits suicide at the end of the opera. I need to refer to the fact that La Arlesiana is not a common title, not even in Italy or many places in the world. La Arlesiana is hardly known, only because of this aria, so people are not familiar with the story. And maybe we should start with that. I just mentioned that it is a composition by the great Maestro Cilea, the Italian Francesco Cilea composer, and he composed it around, this is year 2024, he composed it around 126 years earlier. For it happens to have in the period that we called the Verismo, in a way, at least to me, reminds me a little of the style of composition by Maestro Puccini. The type of voices that he selected for his opera are in a way similar to what Maestro Puccini would have in his own operas. The tenor, Federico himself, what one could think of La Arlesiana is the main character here, and she is in a way, but let's go back to that in a second. The male main character is Federico, from which Il lamento di Federico refers to the lament the main character will have. That's what Il lamento di Federico means, while La solita storia del pastore we will refer to it. It is very interesting that one could think that the same way we have Tosca, the main character, of course, Madame Butterfly, she's the main character, Cho-Cho-san, and many La Fanciulla del West, that is Minnie, Turandot herself. We would think that La Arlesiana would be the female soprano, the main character appearing here, and that the whole story is around her. It is true that the whole story is around her, but what doesn't happen, and it is very interesting, is that La Arlesiana herself never appears on a stage. In a way, it's like referring to more to a concept rather than to a person. Of course, it is said that she's very beautiful. Of course, it is said that she has somehow uh, entered the soul of Federico and taken over control of his thoughts. But all of that, La Arlesiana never appears on stage. La Arlesiana is never a character to whom somebody speaks to, or that she speaks to someone or describes something. It's just, like a reminiscence of, if not a phantasmagoric, at least an ethereal being, auteur, I wanted to say, around which all the story develops, but it's really never seen. Provided that she is never seen, Federico is in love, or he says he has fallen in love with her, but the fact is that he feels and he thinks that his love is getting a positive answer from the woman called La Arlesiana, the woman that lives in Arles. That's where the name comes from. So from Arles to La Arlesienne, it's the name. By the way, it's the composition or the play, in fact, is by Mr. Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet is the title of the original theatrical performance, theatrical play on which Maestro Cilea based his own Arlesiana, the Italianization of La Arlesienne. So La Arlesienne, that makes reference to this person, to this entity that never appears, but that makes everything turn around. We learn about our main character, Federico, when he's sharing that he's so in love with La Arlesiana and that soon he will marry her. In a way, if you remember, Werther, by just seeing once Charlotte, he decides he's the purest and most beautiful woman he's ever seen, and he decides that he wants to spend the rest of his life with her without making sure that she is available. And if you remember, in Werther, Charlotte is not available. She's already committed to marriage to Albert, which in turn detonates. We have spoken that Werther already had in his spirit a darkness that would lately consume him, so that he would decide to commit suicide. In a sense, that is parallel, because Federico, who has very quickly says to be had fallen in love for La Arlesiana and is deciding to marry her, it turns out that La Arlesiana herself had also been committed to another man. That's what in La Arlesiana destroys the soul, because Federico learns from a letter that La Arlesiana was committed to another man, while in Werther he learns that Charlotte is committed to Albert, in the words of the own Charlotte. But it is in a way the same story. Charlotte already belongs to Albert, the same way La Arlesiana belongs already to another man, or had belonged to another man, because the other man arrives in town just to let the family, the mother of Federico, just to let her know that La Arlesiana was hers prior to being Federico's. And that's how, in full despair, Federico decides that he will not be marrying and that his life is worth no more. So he falls in a state of mind of desperation. But this thing that he calls love, of course, we need to if we pay attention to what is happening in the topic, in the libretto, those back days, one can say that, oh, it is romantic love, falling deeply in love for a woman from the very first minute, that all your life belongs to her. But if we believe in another interpretation, what we are seeing, in fact, is an infatuation. He's obsessed with La Arlesiana, because in the second act we will learn that it is like he has lost any sense, any wish for life. Federico he's a young man. He's not a young man who should be enjoying his life. Now it's like he's become a ghost, like someone whose mind belongs no longer to him, and his mother sees him suffering, tries to find the solution by having him fall in love for another girl they have been friends for their whole life. But this girl knows Federico doesn't love her, and he even confesses it. He says that nothing makes sense any longer if he cannot have La Arlesiana with him. This obsession, which will end up eating, devastating everything he has inside his soul. That's what we will witness in this opera. A man who can bear it no longer if he doesn't have the woman for whom he is obsessed. And in a way, it is also a sad story, somehow a depressing story in a sense, like Werther is itself. I am not saying that it is the same style of composition, but there are parallels in the two stories. Another parallel, if you allow me to use this expression, is that Werther is a very famous aria outside the same opera, outside the same Werther, singing about the sadness, while La Solita Storia del Pastore sings about that sadness itself. Going back, now that we have understood the mood and the state of mind of Federico, going back to the comment that unfortunately this aria is so very well known that tenors know that all they need to do to get an applause is to exaggerate. But this exaggeration, that of course gets the applause, goes against the personality, the state of mind of the character. The character Federico, as we will see in the words, is unable to recover from the loss of someone who he didn't really have, but he's unable to recover. So we will perceive this sadness throughout the words. And Maestro Cilea also opening the aria with beautiful, very beautiful melody, another parallel as in Werther. Werther is constructed the same way, with very beautiful melody before the tenor starts singing. It also starts with words that will later make sense to us. If you remember, we have that Werther makes reference to the verses of another poet that he is about to read. In this case, Federico refers to a story that a shepherd was going to tell him. And we have in the notes of the libretto, colpito sinistramente. He's evaded by saying, "È la solita storia del pastore." These words that are to be sung in piano need not to be exaggerated in no way. And remember that this is verismo. Piano, it has to be said in a very simple way. È la solita storia del pastore. It is not la gelida manina. Che gelida manina, se la lasci riscaldar. È la solita storia del pastore. No. Nothing of that. All these notes, in fact, are written, the same note is written for all the syllables. No need to overdo or exaggerate anything. With piano, with a soft voice, we learn "È la solita storia del pastore." I was about to listen again to this story from the shepherd. The shepherd was about to tell me a story, but like if time had stopped for a second, "È la solita storia del pastore." The very beautiful melody again by Maestro Cilea, and discourses a piacere as he approaches the innocent shepherd. He says, "Il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla, essa dormì Again, with a soft voice, il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla e s'addormì. This poor boy, the shepherd, who was about to tell me the story, just fell asleep. How should this be said? No challenging notes here. Maestro Cilea is not asking the tenor to go high in his voice, to go deep in his notes. There is no sign of that. So when we are listening to the interpretations, we listen to the very common fan service of the tenors. Il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla e s'ador. Where is it coming from? There is no need. Il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla. No. Il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla. When he makes a pause, he feels so touched by the peace that the shepherd is reaching in his sleep when he says, Es dormí, and he felt asleep. Notice, and he felt asleep. We are looking tenderly at how this innocent shepherd has fallen asleep. Es dormí. Where does this exaggeration of Es dormí? This is nothing but the wish of a tenor trying to prove his huge voice that can exaggerate and bring to tears people, but that is not the right way to bring people to tears. We will have more of this melody as Maestro Cilea is involving us in this very, very beautiful piece of music, and continues saying, C'è nel sonno l'oblio come l'invidio. Because in the sleep you can forget l'oblivion. When you are sleeping, you can forget, oh, how much I envy him. Remember that Federico is suffering the torture of not having La Arlesiana by his side is killing him. And with all that desperation is when he says, again in piano, as it is stated in the score, which means softly, he has to say, C'è nel sonno l'oblio. In my dreams, there is oblivion. In my dreams, I can forget. Again, come l'invidio. Softly, come l'invidio. Why? Even though he's expressing a not positive emotion, because envying someone, it is not the heart, oh, how much I envy you, I wish horrible things happen to you. Remember that his soul is suffering, and what he is envying is the quietness that the shepherd has. Come l'invidio. Then that's what Maestro Cilea, in a dramatic wrapping of the first part, moves now to this for Federico to describe us in more detail how much is suffering. So he says, Anch'io vorrei dormir così, nel sonno almen l'oblio trovar. I wish I could also sleep that well. Anch'io vorrei dormir così. If only I could sleep like he's sleeping now. And as he does, the same way I could fly in my dreams, and find that peace, find oblivion, find a way to forget her. Anch'io vorrei dormir così, nel sonno almen l'oblio trovar, la pace sol cercando io vorrei poter tutto scordar. La pace sol cercando io vorrei poter tutto scordar. And now that I am looking for peace, that I am looking for forgetting this Arlesiana, all I look for is peace, la pace sol cercando io vo. That's the only thing I'm looking for, peace. Vorrei poter tutto scordar. If only I could forget everything, but it is a soul that it is suffering. That's why, even though you are required to go a little higher, you cannot go, because besides, I forgot to tell you, when he says vorrei poter tutto scordar, it is not only soft but very soft, because we don't have a P of piano, we have a double P, which means pianissimo, much softer. The more you suffer, which seems to be part of the climax of the aria, in fact, it's a climax emotionally, but it is not in the volume. The volume goes lower, which tells us, Maestro Cilea is telling us that this suffering is very, very intimate. With this very, very intimate suffering is that he has to say, vorrei poter tutto scordar. Of course, we have mentioned also in other programs, for a tenor, it is much easier to go, in this case it's an A, it's much easier to go for an A with full voice than going softly, because softly requires much better technique than just going out loud. And what would a tenor for fan service do? He would go loud. And people will be impressed by the fact that he's using all his power to show the suffering of Federico. But that goes against what is written on the score. Vorrei poter tutto scordar. If only I could forget everything. But he goes on and says, pur ogni sforzo è vano, davanti ho sempre di lei il dolce sembiante. Ahimè. Because if only I could forget her, but all my efforts are in vain. All the time present to me, I have his very sweet face. You just try to picture yourself trying to forget a person, and maybe it has happened to you when you say, I want to forget this person, but he's present with me all the time. I go to these places and I remember his or her smile. I go to this and I remember his comments. I see someone from afar and I think it's him or her coming. It's exactly what he's suffering. And that's why he says, all my efforts to get rid of her memory are in vain. I always have her sweet face in front of me. La pace tolta è sempre a me, perché degg'io tanto penar? I have lost peace forever. Why should I suffer this much? He knows, he understands his suffering, and as much he wants to try to fight it, he does not have the strength. And as he does not have the strength, it is impossible that he sings in full voice as if he was Radames or Andrea Chenier. It is not Andrea Chenier. It cannot be sung that full voice. He is sharing us that he has lost peace, that he is unable to proceed with his life. He feels vanquished, and the voice must portray that. So, if you are willing to forget all the exaggerations that tenors do, then you are more willing to accept that Maestro Cilea went for a much modest interpretation, but at the same time, much more sincere and beautiful. La pace tolta è solo a me, perché deggio tanto penar. Because Federico is suffering. Perché deggio tanto penar? In return, what we get in the overdoing of tenors and the exaggerations, perché deggio tanto penar, and also usually rapping with that horrible sound that I cannot get tired of insisting, penar, penar, that horrible way of rapping. Why that is not required. Federico is a very elegant role. Penar. Lei sempre lei mi parla al cor. Because now he's referring to hairs, always hair in front of me. Fatale visión mi lascia. Fatal vision, please. Leave me, you are hurting me so much. Ahimè. Lei sempre lei mi parla al cor, fatale visione mi lascia. And this is the only part with Maestro Cilea has allowed the voice of Federico to go for a forte. But it is a simple forte. It is not fortissimo double F, and it is not fortissimo triple F. The exaggeration of fatale visione mi lascia, it's out of place. That is not what is required. Even though he's suffering and he has reached the climax of his interpretation, it's much more modest than what we are used to listening. So when he says, lei sempre lei mi parla al cor, fatale vision mi lascia. By the way, lascia is not that much higher note. It is a G. So, if tenors like to go higher, and most likely they would like to go higher, it is really not necessary because it is not high in volume, it is just a forte, and it is not high in height, it is not an A, it is just a G. So, how come that we have in a way twisted our own understanding of this aria, and now we are expecting super volume, super exaggerated long note, a weeping tenor, overdoing everything. Fatale visión mi lascia, mi fai tanto male. Because it also has to be exaggerated, right? Mi fai tanto male. And then the final exaggeration with the keeping the me for much longer than necessary. Because in order to be effective, you really don't need to exaggerate. People applaud for that exaggeration, yes. People like the exaggeration of the volume, yes. People applaud at getting the notes for much longer than they are conceived, yes. But is that loyal to the style of the composition of the opera and of Cilea? It's not. So if we are going to give an applause to the singer, we may say that we are giving an applause because he did something impressive, more acrobatics or pyrotechnics than actual art. Because it's much more difficult for a singer to do what is written because he may think oh, if I don't keep the note for much longer, people may think that my voice is not in good conditions. And what I want to get is that applause. And since that I want to get that applause, I will overdo the whole last phrase. Fatale visión mirage, mi fai tanto mal. But that is an exaggeration of the drama. It is drama. It is hard. It is deep. But that is not Federico. Federico, by this moment, has a personality that is already devastated by the suffering for La Arlesiana. So when he says, has to be transmitted with such a pain in your heart that people will give you the applause because they understand the suffering, not because the tenor decided to make pyrotechnics. To wrap up today's episode of this beautiful, beautiful piece of art, I was telling you that there are parallels with Werther, who after his aria would decide to commit suicide. Same case is for Il Lamento de Federico. He learns that the former lover for which he had renounced to La Arlesiana has his plans of getting back to her, so she's actually marrying another man. So he decides that he's unable to continue with life knowing that La Arlesiana belongs to someone else. And so he commits suicide at the end of the third act, of course, leaving the heart of the young woman who was supposed to marry him so that he could cure his heart, and with the very deep suffering of his own mother. And we end watching La Arlesiana, if you have the chance of ever watching it or listening to it, with a deep sorrow in our hearts, because Federico deserved much better, but that's not the story that Maestro Cilea tells us about. And for the golden members, I have selected. I really struggled because I found two versions that I loved a lot. I will be sharing with you in the other episode. But for everyone, thank you very much for having joined me for this masterpiece, La solita storia del pastore, also known as Il lamento di Federico.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.